It all begins in the Chan Financial Building in the city of Chulinyang, where our protagonist was telling his boss that the implemented plan was his idea, telling him that she was going to pursue her dream and that working hard was not something that interested her. The protagonist, wanting to fix his. They also wondered how it was possible that the hotel's second largest shareholder was working as an online taxi driver. Could it be that? Truly a rich kid experiencing life. So it was no surprise that the protagonist spoke with such venomous frankness while pointing. These two were telling the bald man that they wouldn't need him to supply plant-based foods in the future. And regarding Chan's capital injection, Long won't accept it either. And finally, he asks the redhead to kick him out of the place. The blue-haired woman, or rather, his ex-girlfriend, realized the huge mistake that she had made. She committed when leaving the protagonist, and because of that, she wondered how much water she had in her head before breaking up with him. And if it wasn't too late to kneel now, she ends up kneeling, and already on her knees, she told the protagonist that she knew what she did was wrong, but she just let her hold hands. Sorry for that word, it sounds awful. Let's keep telling him that he didn't do the deed with the bald man, and that his body and his mind still belonged completely to him. However, the redhead told the protagonist that Chow was called vanity and wasn't a good woman, telling the protagonist that he might as well look at her, who was still pure. But the protagonist, looking at them both, only thought that these two women were starting to fight over him. The bald man, now with a kinder tone, told the protagonist that he really didn't know if she was his ex-girlfriend or his current girlfriend, but relationship, he tries to call her. However, she doesn't answer, and while lamenting, he wonders what day it is, since he's encountered all sorts of. Otherwise, even if God gave him 100 guts, he wouldn't dare compete with him. However, the protagonist, looking at the blonde-haired man, he asked why he hadn't kicked those people out yet, which led to him calling security himself to ask what they were doing, telling them to take those people away once and for all. And that's how these lovebirds end up being kicked out, even as they beg the protagonist to let him explain themselves. But the protagonist ignores them and ends up throwing them out. The redhead whispered to the protagonist that the boy was the son of boss Tian Mu, who is an investor. But the protagonist, looking at him, just asks what he means by investor, and tells him that they won't get past the board as long as he's against it. So why was the redhead so afraid of him? The protagonist's words caused the blonde to call security. Again, he was told to get rid of that guy too, to deny his membership, and to never allow him to join their group. The boy, extremely angry, told the red-haired man not to dare touch him, and to understand that a mere second shareholder of the hotel group is not someone that they, the investors, would even consider. So, turning around, he told the girl that they had to go eat at another restaurant. However, the protagonist thought that at this point, he hadn't even forgotten to call Miss. So it seems that Miss One has taken a liking to him, and therefore, bad things. However, the protagonist knew that life goes on, and decides to forget what happened, saying, so, no matter how difficult it gets, life has. He plans to steal his date to see if he remains so proud of himself. The protagonist stood up and asked Miss if she would like to have a date with him, and while plucking a flower, she mentioned that her flowers were ready, and suggested they sit down to talk, implying that the joke he made in the car was a thing of the past. For a moment, it seemed to have startled him quite a bit, so he apologizes for what happened. The girl pauses and considers that, since these are all blind dates with wealthy individuals, blind with rich people, why not choose someone with the personality and spirit of a teacher? And so, approaching the protagonist, she tells him that she accepts his proposal, and for the sake of, because of his sincerity, she will give him the opportunity to apologize and make amends. However, the boy doesn't seem to appreciate this very much, and he ends up saying to the girl if he even knows what he was doing, since after all, he was fighting with the protagonist because of her, and if he wasn't perhaps being considerate, insulting him, and doing that. Which makes the girl respond that, in the first place, he wasn't doing it for her, but to save his own face, and furthermore, she didn't ask him to start a fight with the protagonist, but he himself, not satisfied with that alone, told the girl that it was fine, because he didn't dare to mess with the protagonist, but, with her he did dare, telling her not to even think about sitting with the protagonist, since, if that happens, it will embarrass him, and therefore, if she does, she has to think about what will happen to her. However, the protagonist, while the girl was there, told her that she could sit down and eat in peace, and that, if there was any fly, to continue. And while accepting a ride request for his new job as an Uber driver, he couldn't help but wonder why he didn't lose his girlfriend and his job a little later. That was bothering her, he would chase it away. Nevertheless, the bastard lunges at the girl with the intention of hitting her. However, the protagonist, he ends up stopping him, telling him that he was so tasteless that he even wanted to hit a woman. Manager Chen also said that he wasn't going to allow it, that he hit a woman. And so, after the redhead finishes giving the order, the security guards end up escorting the guy out of the place. Now that they are alone, the protagonist decides to formally introduce himself, telling her that his name is Yang Chen, and that it was a pleasure to have dinner with Miss One. She also ends up introducing herself as One, telling the protagonist that she will delete the bad review later, to which the protagonist, smiling, replies that she shouldn't delete it, since the bad reviews are a reminder of their special encounter, and suggests that they should toast to it. The people who were watching from afar, they simply thought that, if that was the arrogance of the rich, then the protagonist directly stole the blind date from the person who had chosen him, while the man just thought it was good to have money, and of course, with money you can do almost anything. The girl, wanting to know a little more about the protagonist, asks about his family, which leads him to respond that his parents had died unexpectedly many years ago, and that he was currently working as a transportation driver. And since the girl had asked him about his life, the protagonist also asks her the same question. She responds that her hometown is City Y. After the ride request was successfully accepted, the protagonist quickly headed towards the location sent to him. Upon arriving at the location, the protagonist proceeded, and that she currently worked in a luxury store, explaining that she went on the blind date because she wanted to stay in the city, which makes the protagonist exclaim that the world has a right to a better life, and there's no shame in a woman depending on a man. He was thinking this, while, in comparison to his ex-girlfriend, Miss One, was very sincere, not being the type of person to beat around the bush. After a few drinks, the girl told the protagonist that, if he knew why she had so many prejudices against him. When he got into the car, she told him the reason was because he had 2 dates on the same day, and the man in front of her seemed quite nice at first, but he actually tried to kiss her while they were watching the movie in the dark. However, the protagonist ends up telling her that if he liked her, he definitely wouldn't deny wanting to kiss her, but the girl disagrees with him, since she thought he wouldn't. It had nothing to do with looking good, because if someone kisses for the first time on the first date, it's bound to be even more awkward the next time they meet, just the kind of thing you do. That the protagonist replies that kissing has nothing to do with how many times you meet, but depends entirely on the atmosphere and the feeling they have, saying that it's even possible to do things on the first meeting as long as the atmosphere is right and there is feeling, but the girl told him she doesn't believe it, asking how could someone be willing to kiss someone the first time they meet. To call his client to tell them that he had arrived and to ask where they were, to which the person on the call responded that words make the protagonist stand up, and to prove to the girl that she was completely wrong, he ends up approaching her in order to. He proceeds to give him a passionate kiss. Lino, the protagonist, is truly an all-rounder. He doesn't waste any time at all. Continuing on, after the kiss, the protagonist tells her to take her time and that he would simply put everything on his account, telling her that. So he was going to room 128 to rest. The girl, who was a little confused, wondered why she didn't resist when the protagonist kissed her a moment ago, wondering if perhaps the protagonist wanted to tell her the room number on purpose. And in the protagonist's room, he was just getting out of the shower when suddenly, he hears someone knocking on his door. That someone was none other than the girl, who wasted no time throwing herself at the protagonist and kissing him. And so, gazing at the protagonist with a face that clearly showed she wanted to get railed, senseless, the protagonist told her that he had a lot. However, the protagonist told her that it was because she was drunk, but she provoked him to such an extent that he couldn't resist, and, like any self-respecting alpha male, he takes the girl in his arms and carries her to his room, and thus the protagonist ends up fulfilling her desire, and ends up giving her the business. The next day, upon waking up, the protagonist realized that the girl had already left. However, she left him a letter. She had just started applying her foundation, and would need at least another 20 minutes. With that being said, we know the story involves a girl, the protagonist, slightly annoyed, in which she told him that he did a good job last night and her sister was very satisfied, and the 3,000 yuan on the table was his service fee and he could use it as a reward, telling him to stay in for a while that month to recharge his energy and wait for her to pay his salary next month, and then she would take care of him at night. My God, this girl apparently wants to do it again. We move on to the Hai Chan financial building, which is where the protagonist worked. The protagonist told the manager that he was there to pick something up and that his name is Yang Chen. Upon hearing the protagonist's name, he quickly gets up, to greet him and introduce himself as the manager of the building's administration office. After the manager greeted the protagonist, he proceeds to hand him some documents containing all of the protagonist's belongings. The manager told him that he could check everything if he wanted to, and if there's any problem, he'll solve it right away, to which the protagonist replies that it wasn't necessary, as he was sure that the manager is a trustworthy person, disciplined, and wouldn't touch his things. And for that reason, he tells him that he will need his help to manage the building in the future. The manager then tells him, the protagonist, that there's no need to thank him, and, calling the girls over, he proceeds to greet the protagonist properly, and from the girl's side, one can see a very pleasant sight. Of course, after the greeting, both the protagonist and the manager were in the elevator, on their way to the office where the protagonist worked. He complained about the same thing, questioning why she had placed the order so early, and asking if she couldn't have requested a car after finishing her makeup and coming downstairs. However, the manager told the protagonist that he was very sorry, but a client has an appointment that day to inquire about renting, and that's why, he won't be able to accompany him for several minutes. The protagonist says it's okay, there's no problem, and he can take the call when it comes in. First, while inside the advertising agency, the protagonist enters and greets his former colleagues, which causes this boy with glasses to approached him, asking why he had resigned, and if he could help him ask Mr. Chang or Mr. Lee for a favor, to which the protagonist replies no, thank you, because he didn't need that. And then, shouting at the top of his lungs, the protagonist declared that he came to ask for his salary and where it was. Chang and Yang, asking if he was perhaps hiding in the office. However, Mr. Chan eventually comes out, all while asking him what he was shouting, asking what kind of place he thought this was, which made the protagonist turn around and tell him that he didn't think he was going to get out of this, asking him if he was ready to pay the commission he owed. Words that prompted the bald guy to arrogantly say that if he wanted a commission, he could go back to work right away, and if he made at least one sale each month, he would be paid 10,000 yuan. The protagonist asks him why he was talking like an idiot, since he had promised him a 20% commission upon successful completion, without any conditions. The bald guy retorts by asking where the proof was, and person on the call kept insisting that she was almost done and needed another half hour, assuring him that she would be ready then, and also warning him that if he even had any proof that he had said that, which the protagonist used as an opportunity to ask everyone if they had heard him say that, stating that the proof, he was in everyone's hearts. However, looking seriously at his employees, he asked if he had mentioned a 20% commission, which leads one of them to step forward and tell him that he believes the protagonist misheard. The protagonist, watching from a distance, wondered to himself, if that person even realizes that there today is there tomorrow. The protagonist's thoughts are interrupted again by the worker, who tells him that Mr. Chan had been very kind to him, so he should thank him and return to work like a good boy, which prompts the protagonist's hair to tell him. He tells the protagonist that it was true, that he values him as a talent, and that this was his only chance to return, so he should go back to his seat and get ready. Work, since he had to go downstairs to speak with management about renewing his contract, asking the protagonist if he thought it was so easy for him to do so, the boss to keep so many employees employed, which prompts the Boboda and the bald guy to tell him that's just how it is, and that everyone should be grateful to him for promoting a platform for them to showcase their talents and to be thankful. He didn't agree with that sentiment and tells everyone that he goes out to work to make money, but they don't even pay him what he deserves, asking if they actually wanted him to thank them for that nonsense. And showing his phone, he told everyone, she would file a complaint. However, the protagonist couldn't care less about this, and he ends up canceling the order immediately. Upon canceling, that he had recorded everything they had said and was going to request arbitration proceedings. However, since the bald guy didn't want that to happen, he tells the blue-haired boy to close the door and grab his phone, and the blue-haired boy, like a loyal lapdog, ends up agreeing and closing the door. However, the manager, who was outside on the phone, was wondering why they were closing the door, and if perhaps something had happened to the new owner, referring to the protagonist. The bald guy told the protagonist to delete the recording immediately, and if he did, he would let him go. And so, the bald guy proceeds to grab a computer and then throw it against the floor, destroying it instantly. Looking at the protagonist, he told him that everyone could see how he had destroyed his computer and, therefore, had his salary deducted. But the protagonist, while pointing to his phone, told him, which was still recording, so everything was saved. Additionally, his phone has a feature called Cloud Backup, prompting him Even if he didn't know about it and tried to delete it from his phone, it was still backed up, which infuriates the bald guy. The blue-haired boy was telling the bald guy that he hadn't been able to talk to the protagonist and that they should beat him up first, and then they had to destroy the backup copies, saying that when he finishes, he should say that he had gone to destroy their computers and they forced him to subdue the protagonist. However, before he could do anything, he is interrupted by someone. So why can't he sign it and get a commission? Something that he responds to by saying that everything he did there belonged to the company and the company favored him. The order. He receives a complaint message which stated that she had never encountered such an incompetent driver and questioned if the job was too difficult for him, who was knocking on the door. That someone was none other than the manager, who said he was looking for Mr. Yang, asking why they were closing the store door in broad daylight, wondering if they had done something to Mr. Yang. But Mr. Yang was confused and asked him, "Mr. Yankee, which Mr. Yang are you talking about?" Yang. But the manager, pointing to the protagonist, told him, who else could it be but Mr. Jean? He was standing there, saying to himself that the protagonist is the new owner of his building, asking the bald man if he was planning to do something bad to his new owner, but the bald man couldn't. He couldn't believe it, wondering to himself, "What do you mean, the new boss?" As the protagonist approached, the manager asked him what he had just happened, apologizing for being late and saying he shouldn't have taken that call, to which the protagonist replied that it was okay, since he had arrived just in time. The blue-haired employee asked manager or director Chen what he meant by saying the new boss was the protagonist, which made him. The manager explained to everyone that the protagonist had spent $1 billion to buy the Haichan financial building, and that he was now in charge. These words left everyone speechless, wondering why the protagonist had even bothered to work there, and if he had just been there to experience life as a rich kid. They also pointed out that he had quit his job yesterday and bought the building today, making it abundantly clear that the protagonist was seeking to teach passengers what to do and how to cancel their orders. However, that wasn't all, because at the very moment he received the complaint, someone suddenly appeared. Revenge. The blue-haired man approached the manager, asking if there was any chance he was mistaken, since the protagonist he shares the same name as his new boss, who angrily shouted at him, asking if he was calling him blind and if he even knew who he was. The bald man approached the protagonist kindly, telling him not to be angry because he had misunderstood, and that it was true that he had done something wrong and needed to be punished. That's why he was going to double the protagonist's pay, saying they should put all that misunderstanding behind them, or rather, that whole matter. Upon hearing this, the manager asked the protagonist if he had worked there before, and if they still owed him wages, which the protagonist confirmed. Seeing how tall the bald man was, the manager told the protagonist that his contract was reinstated. Clearly, they must act in good faith and in accordance with the law. Otherwise, they have the right to terminate the contract and claim up to 3 times the rent. Asking him if he had forgotten about that clause, the protagonist interrupts the conversation to ask if such a clause even exists. Such a clause existed, and if so, then he needed to hear this. So, he shows him the recording, where the bald guy told him that he could go back to work there, and they would give him 1,000 yuan, and only if he actually made at least one deal every month. Seeing that he had no other way out, he tells the protagonist that they didn't need to break the ice, and he would pay him. A beautiful girl appeared in front of the protagonist, making him wonder what the hell was going on. The mysterious girl tells him that it has been detected, 3 times the commission, saying, "So you can delete the recording, and we can consider this matter closed." But the protagonist ends up telling him no, that he only wanted what it belonged to him, and he didn't want a single cent more. As he was leaving, the manager told him to leave something there, and he would take care of ensuring he was satisfied. There was no need to worry, as he would make sure it was well done for him. However, before he could leave, someone ended up yelling at him to stop. This someone was the bald guy again, who told the protagonist that he had already given in to him, and there was no reason to liquidate him, saying, "So, what makes you think it won't fall into your hands in the future?" But the protagonist, smiling, replies that he has never been one of the people who expose themselves, so he shouldn't think he was going to let it go if he was thinking about it so much. However, the bald man didn't. He confirmed this, telling all his employees that he would reward whoever could get the protagonist's phone with 50,000 yuan. However, none of his employees dared to move a single muscle, which made him, in desperation, say that he would then give $100,000 in cash if they could get the protagonist's phone, and that he would also double their salary. However, no one dared to say anything or move at all. The protagonist asks him if He believes that his words still have any credibility, pointing out that he doesn't even give him the commission he's supposed to receive for a job that the host is complying with the binding conditions, and that, furthermore, the negative comments are appropriate and respectful. The system is searching for a link, requesting, and how he plans to double his promise, asking if he thinks everyone is stupid. The manager, seeing how the situation was unfolding, decided they call the office staff and building security to go to the 15th floor immediately. After a while, the security personnel from the security team arrives. The manager, nicknamed the Bald One, wanted to know who dared to be so cruel to the protagonist. However, no one dares to say a single word, since they are aware of the protagonist's current situation. The protagonist, for his part, tells the manager that he will leave everything in his hands, to which the manager ends up saying that he didn't have to worry, as he will make sure that everything is handled wonderfully for him. The protagonist ended up telling everyone that he was going to settle accounts with the bald guy, so why don't they unite and get back what they deserve? If they don't do it now, they will receive nothing when he gets fined. Go bankrupt. Words that caused an uproar in the office, with everyone saying that bald boss had made him work unpaid overtime, and then he fights back. Blue, who is essentially the bald guy's lapdog, would turn against him, claiming that was the way things were, and often deducting his salary without any justification. But the protagonist, while watching him, just thought he was a capricious little lapdog. After a while, as the bald guy gathered his belongings, he told the protagonist that he had ruined his life and wouldn't let him get away with it, which prompts the protagonist to respond that he had ruined himself and didn't have to. Would the host please confirm whether they agree? The protagonist is confused because he has regularly heard about blame anyone else, telling him that there are laws in this world that must be followed. The protagonist, addressing the employees, announced to everyone that he was planning to open an advertising agency soon and use that office, so he asked everyone if they wanted to join him, which is something he does, that everyone would want to sign up. While looking at the blue-haired man, the protagonist asked if he wasn't the bald man's servant and why he was making so much fuss, telling him that he wasn't welcome and should leave. But the man begged him, telling the protagonist that if he went with him to the labor trial against the bald guy, asking if he wanted to go with him and stick with him. However, the protagonist ignored him and just ended up kicking him out of the building, and so, after a while, the protagonist finished talking with all the employees. As the protagonist was leaving, they all bowed to him. After a while, as the protagonist headed to his car, he remarked that now that his revenge was complete, he needed to go to work, and upon getting once inside the car, he immediately received a notification about a new order, and without further ado, the protagonist ended up leaving, commenting that he ought to get on the road, since without profit, there's no gain. Upon arriving at the location, the protagonist noticed that the person he was supposed to pick up was the girl who studied with him at the university, and he felt that this was more than just a coincidence. As the girl got into the car, she immediately recognized the protagonist. Money refunds for good reviews, but never, ever, for bad ones. The girl explains that as long as the system is successfully linked, asking if he was Yang Chang, the protagonist confirmed, saying it was a great coincidence that they had met, and then asking, the same as if she were dating her boyfriend, which leads her to ask him to allow her to introduce herself, or rather, to let her introduce him, saying that this is her boyfriend, Chung Yang Kong, and she also tells her boyfriend that the protagonist was her classmate in college, and back then, was a top student at their university, not to mention how handsome he is, which makes the girl's boyfriend ask the protagonist if it's true that he was very popular among the girls, which she ends up answering for the protagonist, saying, no, he wasn't popular, but that too many girls liked him, but it was a shame he had a girlfriend. And to tease the protagonist a little, she asked him where his girlfriend was, asking him how they were doing. The protagonist, stepping on the accelerator, responded that they had already broken up. The girl replied that it was a shame to think that he rejected so many girls for her, and when she asked if he regretted it, the protagonist responded by saying, I just rejected you. Was there really a need to ask that? Serves her right for being nosy. That's how it is. However, the girl told him that wasn't what she meant, and that he had to thank her, because if he hadn't rejected her, she would have lived a difficult life with him. The girl's boyfriend also asked if perhaps she too, the owner, can have control of the system. If you get a bad review or a complaint, and the rewards are variable and can be in the form of money, he scolded her, he rejected her, to which she responded that it was true. She had confessed to the protagonist when she was 19, but he ended up rejecting her. The protagonist then told her that he had So much time has passed that he's forgotten what he said, and if he misspoke, he apologizes. The girl's boyfriend, while grabbing the protagonist by the shoulder, said to him, who wanted to see how sincere his apology was, saying, "So your company is missing an employee who is generally responsible for serving tea and water, and of cleaning," asking him why he doesn't quit driving for an online car service and join him at his company, words that caused the girl to praise her boyfriend, telling the protagonist that her boyfriend is the planning manager at Edwan, and if he were to work with him, he could ask him to look after him. However, the protagonist ends up rejecting the offer, since he prefers driving Uber and doesn't need administrative work. The girl, upon hearing that, he ends up changing the subject and asks the protagonist what he was doing with the window open, telling him to close it and turn on the air conditioning, since it was incredibly hot. However, the protagonist refuses to do so, because the platform isn't forcing him to turn on the air conditioning, and if, perhaps she wants him to turn it on, she needs to say some kind words to him until he feels happy. These words cause the girl's boyfriend ends up asking the protagonist what he said, adding that if he weren't a classmate from his girlfriend's university, he would have already. Properties, luxury cars, or skills. I want a system like that in my life. That's what I need to escape this poverty. My God. Beaten him, saying, "So turn on the air conditioning right now and don't make me do it myself." The girl calms him down, telling him not to be impulsive, because if the protagonist had been driving and hit him, it would have been the end. If the car were to lose control, the girl asks the protagonist, as an old buddy, to turn on the air conditioning. And if he does, she would pretend nothing happened. Otherwise, she would definitely give him a hard time, criticism, and he couldn't blame her. Then, the protagonist is unfazed by those words and responds by telling him not to think he can scare him with harsh criticism, and that if he doesn't like how he's being treated, then he should get out of the car. The girl's boyfriend, who was absolutely furious, told the protagonist that he should have the car at that very instant and that he needed to hurry up. The protagonist ends up stopping the car, and once they are outside, the girl ends up hitting the protagonist's car while telling him that he needed to get out. However, the protagonist, smiling, told her the same thing. He didn't want to get out of the car since it was very hot, telling them that they could slowly enjoy the summer sun there. And likewise, literally, the protagonist ends up leaving him in the middle of the street, or rather, in the middle of the bridge, which makes him take out his phone and then say that he was going to write a bad review and call to complain, since he wants to leave him completely unemployed. Oh God, if the system only knew that every criticism, the protagonist, with a glint in his eyes, asked if that wasn't cheating. So, why hesitate? He asked the mysterious girl to link him, is equivalent to a gift, of course, for the protagonist. The protagonist, who is in his car, receives criticism from the girl's boyfriend, and upon receiving the criticism, the system, he congratulates him and they reward him with $2 million in cash. The protagonist, smiling, then mocks the girl and her boyfriend, saying it must be nice to be out in the sun on the river in broad daylight. They pass the girl and her boyfriend, who was very upset because the protagonist had posted the recording on the class group chat, and now everyone is blaming her. This prompts her boyfriend to say he wants to take the protagonist's life, so he sent a message to the protagonist telling him that he should apologize to him at the banquet at the Bauki Hotel on Sunday, hoping the protagonist would lose face in front of everyone. However, the protagonist, reading the message, simply said it would depend on whether or not he felt like going to that place that day. Later, the protagonist was working on another delivery. He was talking to his client, asking about their location. Since he was at the agreed-upon location, his client told him that it was raining too much, wondering how he was going to get there and asking him to pick him up, which the protagonist responded that the client should wait, as he would go pick him up right away. So, he grabbed an umbrella and headed to where his client was. Greeting someone, he asked if she was Mrs. Chan. She confirmed, and it seemed that this girl, immediately. However, something the protagonist didn't expect was that, to receive the off-linking command, or rather, for the system to, came across as a bit arrogant, telling the protagonist that there was so much water on the ground that she couldn't walk across and asking if he could carry her. However, the poet tells her he's very sorry, but he doesn't offer that kind of service unless she has a leg problem, which prompts the girl to tell the protagonist that she should look at her new shoes, asking why she didn't wear them, implying that many people have tried to carry her and haven't had the opportunity to return the favor. However, the protagonist apologizes again, stating that he doesn't offer that kind of service and the most he can do is give her an umbrella, and she can walk there herself. Snatching the umbrella, the girl tells the protagonist that she's surprised by his attitude. And, after getting into the protagonist's car, they eventually arrive at their destination. The protagonist tells the girl that now that they've arrived at their destiny could get out with all of his belongings, but the girl responded no, saying that there was too much water on the floor, and she might get her shoes dirty and wouldn't be able to walk back, so he had to bring the car up to her. But what did I just read? Wow, no, this is incredible. But the protagonist ends up telling her that it's a car, not a plane. Of course, how is the car supposed to get up there? I don't understand. He asks her how she wanted him to, or how she wants him to take her upstairs, so he has driven to the entrance of the apartment building. That way she can get out, take a few steps, and then she, a little. To which the protagonist, a little annoyed, told him that it wasn't reasonable, and he ended up leaving, saying this while Bond, it was necessary to do it with a succulent kiss. But, my God, remember your exemplary children. Send me a gift like that, Father, be it the system or the girl. Annoyed, she told the protagonist that she didn't care, and that simply because he was in the service industry, he had to make her happy. At that moment, she was very unhappy with him, and was going to file a complaint against the protagonist, to which the protagonist responded that it was fine, and that she should get out of the car then. He told her to complain outside, but the girl refused, and told the protagonist that she was not going to get out of the car until he took her upstairs. The protagonist ends up getting out of the car while telling the girl that she could stay as long as she wants, since he was going to get a snack, which makes the girl get out of the car and say to he just had to wait, since she was going to file a complaint against him. However, in the blink of an eye, the protagonist ends up getting into the car, and then proceeds to start it and leave the girl behind. Apparently, this was a plan by the protagonist to get the girl to leave. What a great idea, protagonist. He laughed, saying there were all kinds of birds in the forest and all sorts of strange people. Meanwhile, the protagonist realizes there is no tea. At that very moment, the system congratulates the protagonist because he had received a negative review and a complaint regarding his strength. Therefore, the system rewards him with 50 grams of dried tea leaves from the mother tree, instructing him to please open the trunk to retrieve the reward. The protagonist finds the reward from the mother tree to be incredible. However, he asks the system how he can be rewarded with only 50 grams. Mysteriously, after a passionate kiss, she proceeds to tell him that the negative review system has been successfully linked, with the system suggesting that in response, the system tells him that this product is more expensive than gold, saying, the previous auction for 20 grams exceeded 200,000, a rarity now beyond the reach of even the wealthy. The protagonist is shocked by this information, never imagining that the tea, or rather, that tea leaf, was so expensive. After a while, the protagonist proceeds to brew some tea using the leaves the system provided. However, at that very moment, the system informs him that a passenger has given an additional negative rating, which will trigger a critical hit reward. And so, the system congratulates him, announcing that the owner has won the #1 villa in Big Yang, requesting that the protagonist please await the reward at his home the following morning. The property deed, keys, and other items will be mailed to the owner. The protagonist also realized his car recalled that Villa #1 in the Bingyang Villas complex was once the most prestigious building, valued at no less than 500 million yuan, saying it was impressive that he arrived, with an added comment. This person told him that the tea tasted really good. At that moment, the protagonist, he notices a girl, who then gets into the protagonist's car. The protagonist asked the girl what she meant by getting in his car, but, showing him a stack of bills, she told the protagonist to drive, because if he did, all that money would be his. She was literally bribing him. However, the owner had to work hard to get negative reviews, specifically for passengers who are strange or overly nice. Even though passengers usually, he stops and tells her that he is very sorry, but this isn't a taxi, it's an online booking service, and reservations must be made through the TAM platform, and when their car arrives, they can get on. However, since they don't have a prior reservation, they'll have to get off and find another way to travel, which makes the girl tell the protagonist that if she tells him to drive, then he has to drive. However, as they were talking, someone approached the protagonist's car, a person who ends up knocking on his door. While he was telling him to open the car door, the girl told the protagonist not to open it, warning him that if he opens the door, she would bite him to death. The protagonist asks her if she knows him, which prompts her to say that she doesn't know him. And because the girl didn't want to tell him or didn't want to answer, the protagonist proceeds to ask the scoundrel if they know each other, that he tells her that she's his girlfriend, and asks if she doesn't remember them knowing each other. But the angry girl asks the rascal who his girlfriend is, telling him that they were on a blind date. The scoundrel, angrily, questions how it could have been a blind date, telling her that her father owes his family 5 million, and that her father got her out of debt, asking why she's acting dumb with him. The girl, turning to the protagonist, asks if he heard that, since they're not a couple, and that if the protagonist hands her over, he will rape her, making the protagonist an accomplice. The protagonist simply tells her to call the police, saying that he's just receiving good service reviews to maintain their driver rating and order priority, but because the owner, a taxi driver, and doesn't want to get involved in their fight, which makes the girl, now agitated, ask the protagonist why he's such a coward and calling him a weakling, and it's useless. But the protagonist ends up retorting, asking if he's calling him a coward and if his own father isn't the biggest coward of them all, telling him that he had nothing to do with her and that he wasn't obligated to protect her. Seeing the thug trying to get in and clinging to the protagonist, the girl was begging him to please help her, but the protagonist just tells her that she should call the police, which makes her say that she wants to call the police. But even if she does, her family can't afford to pay back the money. The thug ends up grabbing the girl by the hair through the window and said he would kill her. In the car, the thug ends up telling the protagonist to open the door, to let him into the car, and to drive to the suburbs. Then he will let him play after he finishes, but the protagonist ignores him and ends up turn on the car, start it, and leave the boy stranded. As he watched them drive away, he could only say that the protagonist would pay for what he did, that he would make him pay for what he did. After the protagonist rescued the girl from the boy who was harassing her, she proceeded to flirt with the protagonist. But he doesn't fall for her games and tells her that it's useless to flirt with him, since he has no interest in her whatsoever, and that he will drop her off has just received a complaint. The system rewards the owner with a 28% stake in Grupo Hotelero Todas las Islas, All Islands Hotel Group. And yes, folks, it's literally that simple. Door, and she can get a taxi to go home. However, suddenly, the boy appears in his car and warns him, the protagonist, to stop. Seeing the situation, the girl told the protagonist to please not put her down, because that rascal was after her, and if he caught her, she would be really done for. After hearing these words, the protagonist, with a skillful maneuver, managed to lose the boy who was following him, which left the girl very delighted, telling him that, aside from being handsome, he was also very skilled. However, upon arriving at their destination, the protagonist told the girl to get out of the car, to which she, provoking the protagonist a little, told him that she was giving him the opportunity to take her home, and, furthermore, she would give him her first time instead of that bastard taking it. Ooh la la, the protagonist sure is lucky, huh? Wow. The protagonist asks the girl why she has or had the feeling that, who was toying with him, acting like they were in a fairy tale, and saying, so, get out of the car once and for all, which makes the girl, slightly angered, exit the vehicle, while calling him a coward, and, as she left, yelling that he was a blind idiot. We move on to Bianjin Village. The protagonist, who was arriving at that location, is received by an employee. She informed the protagonist that the production certificate, the transaction contract, and the key to Bing Yang, which is the #1 villa, were all included with the certificate, and furthermore, she would personally take him to the villa later. The protagonist, upon entering the place, is called that, thus making him the second largest shareholder of the hotel group, which is why the owner is now being invited to dinner, would find it perfect, since it had everything he needed, and he only had to bring some clothes, and he'd be all set. However, at that very moment, he ends up receiving a call, the nature of which, the call was from the secretary of the board of directors of the Todas las Islas Hotel Group. The secretary informed the protagonist that his presence was required at a meeting at headquarters tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m., which the protagonist ultimately agreed to. The following day, the protagonist arrived at the hotel group's building. Upon arriving, he apologized for his tardiness while introducing himself as Mr. Jean Chan. The other party, while inviting him to take a seat, remarked that he had not anticipated his new second-largest shareholder to be so young, as he had imagined him to be an elderly man. After that statement, the employee proceeded to introduce the members of the hotel group, stating, "This is Mr. Sli Wan Nong, chairman of the Todas las Islas Group, and this is Mr. Chungu, president of Tiamo Inversión, and the topic of their meeting is Tia Muy Valero's investment in all the islands." Upon hearing these words, the protagonist thought to himself, Tiamo Inversión is going to blind date company. There, Mr. Leguizamon ends up arguing that, since they are now acquainted, They had to get straight to the point, telling the protagonist that he knew everything about her affair with Mr. Chan's son at the hotel. As it happened, that Mr. Chan was also present, asking what they wanted to discuss. Mr. Chan argues that he hopes the protagonist won't be offended by. Immediately at the All Islands Hotel, the protagonist was amazed by the system, especially since it provided such a generous gift right after he linked to it, the children's lack of understanding. However, the protagonist tells him that's not true, as his son was wonderful, asking if he perhaps did. He forgives him, telling him not to blame himself, and asking who he even is, a ninja turtle, perhaps? This attitude prompts him to tell Mr. Chan that, for the sake of his promising future, he should please give him a break, and if that isn't possible, then he will ask his son to apologize to the protagonist, words that enrage him. This was all while telling the president that his son did nothing wrong, and if anything, he just couldn't defend his date when she was being harassed. However, the protagonist doesn't give much importance to what he said, and asks the president if there is anything else they need to discuss in that meeting, aside from the capital injection, to which he replies no, that it was already over. The protagonist, standing up, tells him to then make his stance clear to everyone, saying that he disagreed with Aunt Mu injecting capital into the entire island. And so, as the protagonist was leaving, the blue-haired man asked if he was leaving. Maybe he was leaving. When the protagonist finally leaves the room, the blue-haired man exclaims how arrogant he was, saying, so he has that much money to invest in the hotel. What if he's supposed to be pleasing him? Asking why he has to beg the protagonist, to which the president responds not to get angry, since young people are always a little angry, and that, besides, he will talk to him about it later, and Mr. Chan will discuss it with his son, saying, so, a notification then popped up for a new order, informing him that there was a new request, and the destination was the All Islands Hotel Group. The protagonist, if you can solve a problem with an apology, why not do it? Which makes the man, as he got up, respond that it seems fine to him, and that he will return. After talking with his son, the protagonist went to pick up his car. However, a person behind him told him that he had finally found him, and the person who said that was the bully from before, who was surrounded by several other thugs. The protagonist asks the scoundrel why he was there, to which he responds that he had told him before, that if he took the girl, he would dig him up even if he had to which the protagonist replies, what was up with that, and if he wanted to fight. The scoundrel tells the protagonist that there was no rush, since he was sure he would beat him up, but not at that moment, since at that moment, he was going to destroy his car, because he kicked him out. All the thugs, with bats in hand, proceed to destroy the protagonist's car. He then proceeds to take out his phone and start taking pictures of her. The rascal arrogantly told the protagonist that he didn't need to take photos, saying, so, he could afford it, but it would take him 1.5 years to go through the legal process. And if he can't even take an Uber, then he'll see what he can do. To make a living, a red car ends up arriving at the location. A person gets out of the car, and it's the same girl that the protagonist had driven before. The girl, thinking that the world is a very small place, asked the rascal if he had lost his mind, questioning his actions. Upon seeing this, he realized that the order was perfectly timed for him to go to dinner at the Grupo Las Islas Hotel and collect the capital transfer letter. He wrecked the protagonist's car. She asked him if he hadn't promised to stay with her until the evening, questioning the meaning of his actions. The scoundrel will answer that he only wanted to destroy the guy who cared about him, and, pointing at him, argued that his worth was so low that he would only attract someone who drives a rental car. But the girl doesn't stay silent and tells the rich man that her family owes money to his family, and that as long as he has money to pay them, she won't give him a second glance. However, at that very moment, a boy arrives, whose friend is the same one that the protagonist had humiliated in the early chapters. The boy, who seems to be a gangster, told the protagonist, asking him what he had done to offend him, to which the protagonist brutally replied that it was a long story, and then asked him what he was doing there. There, after the capital injection meeting, the boy, while rubbing his face, told the protagonist that it was his fault because his father had told him to apologize, or he wouldn't approve his family's capital injection. The protagonist, smiling, puts his arm around the boy's shoulder, and it's clear that the protagonist was plotting something. The protagonist asked the boy if his family had a lot of money, if they were very rich, a question to which the boy replied that, of course, since his family has a total of $1 billion, which made the protagonist, while pointing at the crook, ask the boy, yes, folks, that order is for the very place where the protagonist was headed to finalize a capital transfer agreement. So now, the protagonist is going, if he happened to know him. The boy tells the protagonist that this crook has several real estate companies in which his family has invested. The protagonist wanted, taking advantage of the moment. He asks the boy if he wants to end things once and for all, without apologizing, which prompts the boy to ask him if he, perhaps wanted him to take care of the scoundrel. The protagonist tells the boy that his father is intelligent, suggesting they make a deal. If he lends money to Wang Jianan's family for emergencies, then he will agree to his terms. Remember that the protagonist is referring to the redhead's family. The boy asks the protagonist why he doesn't just lend him the money, since he has a 28% stake in the All Islands Hotel, valued at more than $3,000 million, asking him, "So, what do you need $50 million for?" But the protagonist, pointing to his car, tells him that he's still driving Uber, and that, if he couldn't see what that meant, which made the boy want to say something, the protagonist ended up silencing him, and the boy understood the situation. The protagonist told him that he could tell the redhead's father to have someone come to his office tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss the details. He clearly said all of that out loud for everyone to hear. As the redhead approached, the protagonist told her that she had led people to Tiamu to invest in Te Amo before 9 a.m. and had discussed the loan with them, saying, "So, Mr. Shante Amo has already accepted that he would be a fool to continue working for that vampire's company." After a while, he was gathering his things, to kill two birds with one stone. After arriving, picking up the client, and confirming her identity, the girl, now inside the car, asked the protagonist, and if she was willing, they could discuss it. Throwing herself at the protagonist, very happy, she told him that he had finally realized it, since he couldn't catch up with his long legs, the rascal approached the boy. "What's going on? Why did his family lend money to the redhead? What if he tries to get in his way?" Which prompts the boy to approach the rascal and tell him that it's not that he can't take him. Well, with him, it's that the protagonist is the second largest shareholder of the hotel chain on all the islands, asking if he finally understands what's happening. After hearing those words, the rascal ends up throwing the bat while lamenting and saying that the protagonist must be a young master from a great family who has gone out to gain experience. The bullies who were with him asked what they should do, now that they had upset him, to the young master of a large family, as the protagonist approached and questioned why he hadn't been informed that he was the group's second largest shareholder. The hotelier said, "So, if I had mentioned it earlier, you wouldn't have had such a significant misunderstanding." The protagonist retorted, "Does he assume everyone is like him? Because they believed everyone was aware that he is Chan Yang's son." At that moment, police officers arrived, inquiring about what had occurred, passed, and which of them reported it. The girls, waving their phones, pointed to Ella and told the police officer that she was the one, saying, "So, your friend's car has been destroyed." The thugs who were with the scoundrel pointed at him and told the police that they destroyed the car, but that he had. Why he kept looking at her through the mirror prompted the protagonist to ask if he didn't know how to drive, because he wasn't looking at her, has been destroyed. The thugs who were with the rascal, pointing at him, informed the police that they had destroyed the car, but that he had. He gave the order that if anyone was to be arrested, it would have to be him, which prompts the policeman to approach and question him. He asked what happened and why he destroyed someone's car, to which he replied that his name is Chan and Chi, and his father is Chang Yang, the president of the group. He said Yahoo, and explained that the reason he destroyed the car was because the protagonist had stolen his girlfriend, asking if he shouldn't teach him a lesson. While looking at a document, he confirmed that it was true, asking if he was willing to offer compensation, to which he responds that the compensation is possible, but the court must decide on the amount. However, the policeman asked him if he was stupid, because this concerns a judicial decision, not a matter of simply paying money, because intentionally damaging someone else's property, with damages exceeding $5,000, is a crime. This leads Ribbon to mention once again that her father is Chan Yao Guo. However, the police didn't care, telling her that they don't care who is her father, because she committed a crime by damaging someone's property, and telling her, "So, think about how you're going to fix this." He then responds to the police officer that it's fine, offering to pay for the car since he doesn't need the money, and asks the protagonist how much he needs, wondering if perhaps he was looking at the road conditions behind him. By the way, this girl's name is One, and honestly, the girl is quite attractive, a bit. $100,000 is enough, the protagonist responds, or rather, asks him if he ever said that he would accept a private settlement. So he was right, and the court had to determine who was at fault, as he pointed at the protagonist and asked if 100,000 was enough. How about 200,000? He said his car only cost 100,000 new and that he shouldn't be too greedy. But the protagonist responded that it's not about the money, he just wanted justice. This prompts the protagonist to ask if he was trying to scare him, saying that it doesn't matter, who have a criminal record, also telling him that he doesn't need to find a job since he only has to wait for his inheritance, arguing that he wasn't afraid of anything or anyone. However, he himself ends up being taken away by the police, who were saying that the boy was too arrogant. So, already at the police station, the boy's father eventually arrives. The boy's father told the protagonist only had to name a number as he pleased, which he does. He uses the argument that the two were very close, since they had the same approach. To resolve the problems, not a single word of apology, and that he wasn't going to reach an agreement with him, since he was going to fight that case. However, he didn't want to give up, and offers the protagonist 500,000, asking if that was enough, but the protagonist, shouting, tells him if he hadn't already said no. Disgusted, she asks the protagonist why he's attacking her simply for not knowing how to drive, when she only asked a simple question, telling him that it was about money. Why couldn't he understand that? But the boy's father kept insisting and now offers him $1 million, saying that he wouldn't give more than that, questioning him. So, is he implying that he would have discussed it with him if the company hadn't gone public at such a crucial moment? That's what he argued. Don't be so arrogant. However, despite the large sum of money offered, the protagonist ignored his words and asked the police officer if he was free to leave. To which the officer replied, yes, but he had to sign an agreement refusing mediation because they were either continuing with or altering the legal procedure. However, as the protagonist was signing, the boy's father, while holding onto the sheet, told him to wait a moment, saying that if he leaves even a single line in the wharf, sand, he would be able to see him again, telling him that he was still very young and shouldn't limit his future. But the protagonist, while taking the sheet of paper from his hand, signaled that if he was finished, he needed to let go, saying, so, since I was 15, I had received many threats from his lenders. If anything, he believes their threats will work on him, and as he left, he told him he'd see him in court, which the man affirmed. He just had to wait to release him. After that, the protagonist went to a place that apparently sells houses. The girl, while something was happening to her, said to the protagonist that the photos of the house have been taken and his keys were here or there, asking him if he has any idea about the prices, which the protagonist. Obviously, his driving technique wasn't good at all, and that he was very slow. Upon hearing that word, without a second thought, the protagonist floors the accelerator. He answered no, but he would decide based on the market, and while the protagonist was leaving, he told the girl that he would give her or leave her the house, and if she needed, all he had to do was call him. Once outside, as he walked through the city, he told himself that he should buy a car as soon as possible, since he couldn't afford to waste time with Uber, wondering if he should buy a brand new car. However, at that moment, he was interrupted by a system message, which informed him that the system had detected that the owner had received an additional negative review. Additional criticism triggered an extra bonus, causing the protagonist, very excited, to ask the system what it was, and if it was something else good, which prompted the system, while giving him a kiss on the cheek, to congratulate him on obtaining the HT Unlimited Edition luxury car, and also a ordinary car, implying that it's the most suitable for the owner to use for Uber driving, and requesting that the customer be asked to pick it up, the car from the underground garage at that moment, and as the girl handed him the key, the protagonist remarked that the system girl was the best, thus flattering her for his exploits, and after taking the key, he mentioned he would go home to rest and play again tomorrow. Back at his house, the protagonist was outside, enjoying a beautiful view, as his villa was located next to the river. This girl was observing the protagonist from a distance. This girl is to the bottom, which scares the girl quite a bit, and she asks him to calm down, but the protagonist wouldn't listen and continued on. The owner of the villa, Sue Shinner, who turned around and instructed her employee that she had asked her to investigate the owner of Villa Number 1. What if she had done it? She replies that she asked the security guard, who told her that the owner of Villa 1 was very young, but he drove a very ordinary car and didn't look like a rich man at all, which leads the girl to say that, with such a low profile, he could be the son from a large family, and she tells her employee to take a couple of bottles of wine so she can pay him a visit, but without asking any special questions about his life. She just needed to know that they were in Villa 8. As night falls, someone is ringing a doorbell. A doorbell was at our protagonist's house. When he answers, he asks who is ringing the bell and if he can help them with anything, to which the girl, while greeting the protagonist, told him that she was the housekeeper from Villa number 8, just across the street, and that her employer had prepared a small gift for him, and he had asked her to go and greet the new neighbors. The protagonist, very grateful for the gift, told her that she was very kind, asking, "What is your employer's name? What is your owner's name?" To which she replies that her owner's name is. Then she asks the protagonist what his name is. The protagonist replies that his name is Young Chen, and when he invites her to come inside and take a seat, the girl declines his offer, explaining that her employer only asked her to pay a quick. Seeing that she had no choice but to apologize, the girl tells the protagonist that she was truly in the wrong. However, the protagonist continued full speed ahead, and that, besides, since they were neighbors, they could look out for each other in the future. And back in Villa number 8, the girl asked her employee how he had heard, to which the woman replied that the protagonist was a handsome young man, likely the son of a prominent family, adding that she left after giving him a gift and would definitely return it to him soon, telling the young lady that she could wait without worry. Moving on to the protagonist, he was having a glass of wine and commenting that it was too early to sleep, suggesting he took a 2-hour walk before returning to bed. And so, after several minutes, the protagonist decides to head out. After a while, the protagonist ends up picking up some clients. This girl, after getting in the car with her boyfriend, told the protagonist that he was a student at the University of Finance and asked if he could possibly drive to the entrance of the women's dormitory first. At 10:30, the protagonist replies that, according to the navigation system, it's 15 kilometers away and will take at least 20 minutes, making it a bit difficult. The girl's boyfriend was telling the protagonist that his girlfriend's dormitory closes at 10:30, asking him to please help her get there faster, all while thinking that he had done it deliberately, that he wanted his girlfriend to be locked out that night. And with that being said, we realize that apparently this guy didn't want to arrive at his girlfriend's place on time because he wanted her to be stuck outside until dawn so he could do some fun stuff with her. He continues to the point of making the girl call him father. However, upon hearing that, the protagonist decides to stop the car, telling her that, to her, the prota sped up as well, saying it was okay, that he would get them there just in time and they could relax, which made the girl thank the prota. However, her boyfriend, the protagonist, told her not to talk so much because if she didn't get back to the dorm by 10:30, not only would she not get paid, but she'd have to send them back. The girl didn't like this, and she asked her boyfriend what he was talking about. However, he approached her and told her that he was only fine. He was just trying to scare the protagonist into driving faster. The protagonist tells them not to worry, because if he says he can do it, it's because he can do it, adding that he also graduated from the University of Finance and Economics and was familiar with the nearby roads. So 15 minutes is enough. These words from the protagonist seemed to pique the girl's interest, and she then asked him what department he was in and what his name was. The girl introduces herself as Linhu, an English major, and says, "I didn't expect such a coincidence, running into a brother's car like this." But just as the protagonist was introducing himself to the girl, he was interrupted by her boyfriend, who asked what was going on and why he wasn't continuing on the road. So he asks him where he was headed and why he had detoured. The protagonist replies that if he continues on the main road, he won't be able to get back, saying to him, "This way, you can save 5 minutes by taking the shortcut, and you'll arrive right on time at the dormitory door." Words that leave the boy feeling a little. She was a good girl, and that they had already arrived at the hotel. Therefore, he asks the girl to get out. As she gets out of the car, she tells the protagonist that, depressed, since his plans were falling apart. The girl, very excited, told the protagonist that it seemed he knew his way around well, and then she asked him, "So, if you could add it on BX, which is apparently a communication app similar to Messenger or any other communication platform, the argument is that they'll be able to contact the protagonist directly if needed." After several minutes, this concludes with the girl arriving at the designated location. As she exited the car, she thanked the protagonist for arriving just in time. The protagonist then notices that her boyfriend hadn't gotten out of the car, and she asked if he wasn't going to get out there, to which he replied that he was going to place another order, thereby implying to the protagonist that he had to accept the order. Immediately following this, the protagonist's phone received a system notification informing him that, thereby implying to the protagonist that he had to accept the order and continue, and immediately after, the protagonist's phone received a system notification informing him that, "I received another bad review." As the protagonist looked at the boy, he realized he had just received that order tonight, and it must have been from this boy in the last row. And because the protagonist received a bad review, the system ended up rewarding him with a practical version of Baji Quan with immediate effects. Oh, what a wonderful system. It even grants him skills so he can learn how to fight. After receiving the reward, the protagonist could feel a very pleasant type of power. Addressing the boy, the protagonist asked what he meant by that, since he had only sent his girlfriend the room information. She was going to give him a bad review or file a complaint, but that is what the protagonist wants, since remember that each complaint is equivalent to a prize, and apart from time. He asked why he left a bad review, wondering if he had done something wrong, but the boy simply told him to drive better. Don't get distracted, as I will explain this later. After a while, when they arrive, the protagonist finally reaches the location, and while he was parking, he asks the guy, who now realizes he gave a bad review. However, the guy takes out his phone and says that they can come now. Apparently, this was the boy's trap to ambush the protagonist. At that moment, several men arrive and begin fighting hand to hand, hitting the protagonist's car. They told him to come out, which he does. The protagonist asks the boy what he meant by all of this, to which he responds that he spent the whole day with her, eating, drinking, and having fun, and deliberately delayed going to the hotel with her until the last 15 minutes, telling the protagonist that, if anything, he hadn't said he couldn't. Arriving at the residence, he took a shortcut and sent her home. The protagonist told the boy that if they are dating, then why bother with all this? It was just one night, and furthermore, he himself had encouraged him to take her back. As soon as he got in the car, he didn't realize the protagonist was playing hard to get, difficult. However, as the boy exited the car, he told the protagonist to stop messing around and, hitting the car, said that he had ruined the day, demanding that he get out of the car once and for all. The protagonist, while looking at him, thought that he had only just learned valet and one, and, therefore, did not. Of his colleagues, told him not to be so impulsive, since he didn't yet know the kind of virtues that Mr. Chan, that is, his boss, had. His other colleague, complaining at that very moment, she would then call the police to arrest him for dangerous driving. After the girl sends in the complaint, it shouldn't be a problem to clean up some trash like them. The bullies, seeing that the protagonist got out of the car, told him he finally had the guts to come out. So they were planning to wrap things up early to grab some skewers, but before they could even start, the protagonist steps in and stops them, which leaves the bully slightly bewildered. Arrogantly, he asks the protagonist if he's scared, and if so, he should kneel and apologize. And if he does, he'll let him go. The protagonist replies that it's not about fear, but rather that there's surveillance on that pole, so it would be bad if they got caught. Hitting him, he tells him to go somewhere dark where they can finish things, and there won't be any evidence left, which the boy agrees to. And once they're in the alley, the protagonist quickly turns around, and instantly, a lot of screams are heard. After a while, we can see how the protagonist, he had beaten up all the bullies, leaving one standing but badly beaten, and asked the boy who he thought he was messing with, since he didn't even have to fight before she knocked him down with a single punch, telling him that he was responsible and that he was going to pay all of his medical bills. The boy, completely scared, told him that he didn't know the protagonist knew how to fight and that he felt a lot of pain in his chest. He believed that the protagonist broke his ribs. At that very moment, he is interrupted by the protagonist, who asked him to come closer, but the boy told him that he couldn't, since it seems that the system congratulates the protagonist, the owner, because of the poor reviews regarding structural integrity, and rewards him with the ownership of he broke his ribs, telling him that he can no longer hit him, and that if he does, he will surely kill him. The protagonist tells him that he had to get closer, and that they needed to speak without hitting him, which the protagonist ends up doing himself while grabbing him. That's why the teacher told him to change the bad review, since it's the first order for his new car. After the protagonist leaves, the boy's girlfriend calls him to ask what he did with her boyfriend, and if he did something, she'll transfer the cost of the trip. But the protagonist ends up telling her that she doesn't have to pay the fee and should instead use it for her boyfriend's medical expenses, since her boyfriend called some guys to beat him up. And, of course, he returned the blows and hurt him. Furthermore, her boyfriend is not a good person, so he advises her that she should change him soon. A minute later, they show the boy walking, badly injured. However, he ends up receiving a call from his girlfriend, who demands to know why he blocked. He asks someone to hit the protagonist. Enraged, he tells her to remember when they first met, recalling how enthusiastically and sweetly they chatted in front of him, asking if she ever stopped to think about how he felt, arguing that, for her information, he had just been beaten up. He asks if she was worried about the protagonist, but we clearly know that he was the one who received the beating. Continuing on, the angry girl asks him what's wrong, since she doesn't. Financial building, while simultaneously instructing him to go to the building's management office tomorrow. Understand him. However, he doesn't answer her and ends up hanging up the call, saying that if she doesn't want a bad review, then he won't do it. But in his workplace will file a complaint and see what he does after that. We immediately cut to the protagonist, who, while on his way home, he ends up receiving a message from the system informing him that a complaint has been detected against the owner again, and therefore the system congratulates him for the opportunity to strengthen his overall physical condition, a process that will last 49 minutes. When the user is ready, he can give the system the order to physically strengthen him. The protagonist ends up thanking the boy for his ridiculous complaint, because thanks to that complaint, he has received another great gift. Once inside his house, the protagonist tells the system to begin strengthening his body, to which the system responds that you have received your order to begin strengthening your body, and that you should please wait, as the entire process will take 49 minutes, and during that time, you should not interrupt the system while the process is in progress, so the strengthening will begin at that point. 9 minutes later, the system then notifies the protagonist that the strengthening process is complete and that the owner is now free to move, and from that moment on, excluding external factors like souls, he was the strongest man on earth. Literally, the protagonist became a god in his world, without financial building there, Joan, in order to pick up the transfer letter, the real estate certificate, and other documents. This reward makes the protagonist very happy, because, however, the protagonist notices something. It smelled terrible. He wonders why, which makes him wonder if, perhaps that is the legendary meridian cleansing, and if so, he needed to bathe quickly. Next, we see the protagonist, who was after doing some light exercise, he runs into the owner of Villa 8. The protagonist greets her and asks if she is the lady from Villa 8, to which she confirms, asking him if he is the owner of Villa number 1, Yang Chen. In response, the protagonist replies yes, and thanks her for the previous gift, saying he really loved it, to which the girl responds with equal kindness, saying that it was no problem at all, as she was very happy that he liked it. After shaking hands, the protagonist leaves, leading the girl to think that he was, as expected of a son from a great family, while running, or rather, jogging. He pondered whether, now that he's met Aji, it would be inappropriate not to return the gesture. But what could he give her, since the protagonist had previously received a gift from the system, which, let me emphasize, was tea leaves. He decides to give her those. Time passes, and we're taken to the protagonist, who is ringing the doorbell of Villa 8, and, upon it being opened, is greeted by the employee from before, who asks him to come in. The protagonist says that, since he didn't have anything to give in return after receiving her gift last night, the financial building was the same building where he used to work, and while inside the hotel, the girl notices the protagonist, leading her. He has some tea at home and wants to share it with them. Miss Yu-Yi, from upstairs, tells him to take a seat and asks her employee to entertain the Wan. The protagonist, with the Westlake he bought last time, has his employee tell his mistress that he just said he wants to share his tea with her, asking him if he could prepare it. The girl, very happy, says that sounds good, and asks the employee to go boil the water. However, the protagonist tells him that they should try it, since he won't be drinking it, as they have to hurry and drive the car, which makes the girl ask the protagonist, "What do you mean, a car?" asking him what he does for a living, to which the protagonist responds that he runs an online goods transport service, and without further ado, the protagonist ends up saying goodbye and leaving the girl deep in thought, wondering, what do you mean, driving a taxi online? Wasn't the protagonist supposed to be a rich man? After the protagonist had left, the employee asked her mistress what kind of tea it was. The girl, Albert, regarding the leaves, tells her employee that she doesn't know either. He had never seen it before, so he told her to take those tea leaves to the drawing room so he could examine them, since he should know what kind of tea it is, which the employee eventually agrees, telling her that she was already on her way. She wondered if a transport driver could afford Villa number 1, and referring to the protagonist, she remarked that he was a very mysterious man. We move on to the protagonist, who was picking someone up, that someone was the redhead, to believe that the protagonist was following her, and she asks him why he would dare to do so. However, the protagonist ignores her and heads, who was more radiant than ever. She asked the protagonist why he had switched to such an ordinary car, telling him that he needs to driving a sports car or something. She looks at him and asks what he thinks, questioning if maybe her legs are longer and whiter now that she's fixed herself up. Fixed up, but the protagonist only replies by asking her to stop talking, since he has 99 points for not talking and 59 points for talking, so he asks her to stop, put on her seatbelt because they were about to leave for their destination. On the way, the girl told the protagonist that she had made a reservation at Mara's to take him out to dinner that night. However, the protagonist tells her to forget about it since he doesn't have time and has to run the vehicle transport service online. And besides that, he asks if she was planning to get him drunk and take him to a hotel, to which she responds with a question, asking him, that's why he was so handsome, or so he argued. His father told him that he had already negotiated the contract and that they could wait for the funds to arrive in the account. He's leaving tomorrow morning, so he wants to invite him to dinner as a thank you. However, the protagonist tells him that he has already received his royalty, so he doesn't need to eat. However, the girl, a fair-skinned girl, with beautiful skin, long legs, large breasts, and a thin waist, invites him to dinner, and he actually turns her down, asking if he was a man, implying there might be something wrong with his sexual orientation. And the truth is, folks, even I. Approaching the receptionist or waitress, I'm not sure which, he simply showed her his phone, prompting her to tell him that his seat was at table 8, and his would think that, because how could the protagonist reject such a stunning beauty? The protagonist stepped on the brakes and told the girl that they had arrived at their destination, and if she didn't have something else to say, she had to get out of the car, which she ends up doing. From outside the car, she asked the protagonist if he wasn't interested in women. However, the protagonist doesn't answer them at all. Time passes, and the scene shifts to this girl, who is being harassed by a man, and who, besides, this girl had requested a ride through a VTC service. The harasser asks the girl if she still wants to take a car, telling her not to even think about going anywhere, sighed if she doesn't pay, but the girl told him that it really had nothing to do with her, since it wasn't her fault if the motorcycle fell and hit his car. However, the guy didn't believe her words and tells her that he has been parked there for 10 minutes and hasn't even fallen, but she passes by and it falls. Who did she think he wanted to deceive? And if she doesn't pay, the protagonist approaches and asks the boy if he wants to go to the bakery next door to check the security camera footage, which the girl agrees is a good idea. Since he mentioned that he can check the surveillance footage, he points out to the protagonist that his car still has a temporary license plate and assumes, which is also new, so he advises him to mind his own business, or else he'll let him experience what it's like to have a car new that gets wrecked. However, the protagonist simply responds by asking if he's trying to blackmail him to prevent him from watching the surveillance video, and tells him his staff would escort him there, handing him a document and asking him to please keep it safe, as the manager wanted him to have it. Once he was seated, that it's inappropriate for a man of 1.7 meters to take money from a girl, to which he replies that it's none of his business and he should just stay quiet and don't embarrass yourself, which is why the girl called for her car. And if an order isn't finished, you can't accept the next one, warning her, let her go now, or I'll call surveillance and we'll find out the truth. However, he then grabbed a bat and told the protagonist, believe it or not, he will destroy his car. The protagonist simply replies that, if he can afford it, then he's free to destroy it. But the guy tells him that it's just an ordinary car, and he can buy 2 of his cars and still have gas money left over for a few years, to which the protagonist tells him that he should just crush it and not dwell on the matter any further. As he rolled up his sleeve, he asked the protagonist if he really thought he wouldn't dare, which makes the girl tells the boy not to involve others in his affairs, but the protagonist ends up taking her hand, telling her not to stop him. He tells him to leave it alone, to crush it, because he has sent some people to prison and wouldn't mind sending another. So, without further ado, the boy launches into day, hitting the protagonist while saying that if he doesn't do it, he will be ashamed of himself if he doesn't destroy his car that day. However, he decides to stop himself. This was while he was thinking that, fortunately, he spotted the letters with sharp eyes, or else he would have had to pay more than 100,000 if that stick had. The protagonist notices that the girl was approaching, but not him. She was heading towards someone else, whom the protagonist ends up greeting, Fallen. The protagonist asks him what was happening, what he was doing, what he was looking at, and asks if he wasn't going to crush his car, but the boy, when he dropped the bat, the protagonist apologized profusely, suggesting that the wind might have been responsible for knocking over the bicycle and hitting his car, implying he had nothing to do with it. The little beauty then said, Just take her with you. Problem solved. The protagonist, giving him a cold glare, questioned what was going on, asking if he wasn't going to. Hadn't said he wouldn't belittle himself, but instead would destroy the car. However, the man only replied that it was all his fault, urging them to get in the car quickly, and don't waste your precious time on it. Once inside the car, the girl expressed her gratitude, acknowledging that she would have been in trouble that day. The protagonist replied that there was no need to thank him, explaining that it was destiny, and if he hadn't called for his car, he wouldn't have been able to help her. The girl, a bit curious. He asks the protagonist why the boy was suddenly so polite to him, to which the protagonist replies that he doesn't know, but perhaps it was a sudden change of heart. After several minutes, the protagonist finally arrives at his destination. The girl, very grateful, asks the protagonist what his name is, telling him that her name is Chow Yun, and explaining that it's almost dinner time, and her roommates invited her to dinner that day, so why doesn't he join her? The protagonist ends up rejecting the offer, saying that it wasn't necessary, as she should have fun with her friends. Observing the situation, he comments that it seems they are there for a blind date. However, the protagonist notices that other people are entering, and companions. However, before leaving, the girl suggests that he should add her as a contact, since she will call him again next time, which the protagonist, he ends up accepting. After the girl left, he mentioned he was really hungry, so after a while, the protagonist finally arrives at a restaurant. As he enters, he immediately receives a message, but it wasn't from the system. It was a message from Xiao Jun, who was asking if he had already left, saying that she was in room 302 and that he had to help her because she wasn't feeling well at all, and they definitely put something in her drink. Realizing that the girl is in trouble, the protagonist quickly headed to that location. Upon arriving, the protagonist asked the receptionist if she could please go to room 302 and check what was happening inside, since one of his companions, the class, is inside eating and hasn't come out yet, something she ultimately accepts, telling him that she'll do it right away. However, at that very moment, just then, the girl appears next to the scoundrel who wrecked the protagonist's car. Earlier, the girl was asking her classmates to please let her go, because she wanted to return to her dorm. However, they tell her not to worry, as they would take her back to the dorm right then, which causes the dorm. The protagonist then kicks a small table, which ends up hitting the scoundrel. This leads the protagonist to say it was a great coincidence, since he didn't. He also advised him not to leave, asking what would happen if he lost his job, and what his girlfriend would do with her paralyzed father. He introduced them. The young lady with yellow hair is called Cheng Zhan, the bald man is Li, and finally, the one with blue hair is Chaufa, and the protagonist's ex-girlfriend, who he couldn't believe they'd met there, but the protagonist simply responds by saying that his father is very skilled, since he got him out of jail so fast. With a threatening look, the protagonist told him to get out of his way, saying he wasn't free that day and to leave him alone, and then they proceeded. As he was leaving, the protagonist stopped him to tell the girls who were holding Chow Jun that they were truly such good companions, room for her, that they even tried to get her drunk just to take her to a man's bed, to which she responded by telling him not to talk nonsense, since they are a couple who had a conflict and drank too much. However, the protagonist, while showing him his phone, asked if that was because she sent him a message asking for help, which surprised them. The rascal told the protagonist that he was in a relationship with Xiao Yung, so don't give me that crap about him putting something in her drink, warning her that she better leave, to which he replies by asking if that's what she thinks. Then she'd call the police and have a doctor check if she's been drugged. You know I can't mention that word, but it's implied there, or that someone put something in her drink. Drink. The rascal, while she cursed him, told her that he was just trying to annoy her, and since she wasn't on good terms with him, he was trying to mess with her. Leaving the place, the protagonist told him that he just had to wait, since he swore he would get revenge. The roommate ends up releasing the girl to the day. Cian's girlfriend thought it was just a coincidence that she ran into the protagonist. The yellow-haired girl ends up telling the bald man that she was going to protagonist, all while telling him that it wasn't their problem anymore, since they were leaving. The protagonist, grabbing her face, told the girl to wake up and react, but apparently, she really was too drunk. The protagonist told the person carrying her to take her to another room, somewhere else, while he took her in his arms. The receptionist asked if she could give him a private room, which she confirmed. Once they were in the room, the girl asked the protagonist if he had already saved her, which he ended up confirming, telling her yes, and also asking her what had happened. She told the protagonist that her roommates had invited her to dinner, but when she arrived at the reserved room, she realized that they were also acting strange. So, when she was about to leave, they told her to have a glass of juice, and that's when, after taking it, she felt dizzy and strange. The protagonist, equally unbothered, stated that they had obviously put something in the glass of juice they gave her, then asked her what she was going to do now, at which point the girl got up from her seat, told the protagonist that this was outrageous and unforgivable, and that she would call the police. The protagonist also took out his phone and agreed, saying that they couldn't let the bad guys get away with it, something which the girl ended up affirming. After a while, we see the girl leaving with the police in order to explain what had happened. Time passes, and greet an old friend, and approaching the protagonist, she tells him that he was going too far and asks if he wanted to meet up and hang out sometime. We are taken to the protagonist, who was arriving at his house, where the employee of the woman from Villa 8 was waiting for him. Upon seeing her, the protagonist asked what she was doing there. She responded that her mistress would like to invite him for a cup of tea, and then she left. She wondered if that would be convenient for him. The protagonist thanked her for her kindness, but said he was too tired that day and wanted to rest early, telling her that he would return early tomorrow evening and hoped that Miss Chu and she could come to his house for dinner, which the maid ultimately agreed to, while saying that she would prepare some dishes for tomorrow before heading back to the villa. Liu asked her employee what happened, and if she had invited the protagonist. The employee replied that she had, but he said he was too tired and wanted to go to bed early, but he invited them to his house for dinner tomorrow, the night, leading her to remark that the protagonist was no ordinary person, because all the other neighbors want to visit his house every day, but the protagonist is the only one who can't even be bothered to be invited, and for that reason, she ends up saying that she likes him the way he is, and tomorrow night, she will find the opportunity to discover his true identity. Meanwhile, the protagonist was talking with Shou Young, who was telling him that the police said that it was done only by her roommate, and that it did not cause substantial damage. They only criticized and lectured her, but the real mastermind was, they literally thought the protagonist was following them. However, the protagonist responds that he wasn't that bored and that he isn't. Clearly change, so she doesn't like at all that he got away with it. The protagonist tells her that he understands perfectly, but still, proof or evidence. So he asks her to be careful in the future, as he will find a way to resolve things with Shang. The next day, the protagonist was picking up some passengers who entered in a rather unpleasant manner. One of the boys even proceeded to take off his shoes, thus leaving a bad odor in the air. The protagonist, upon seeing this, told him to please put his shoes back on, sit down, and fasten his seatbelt. Without. However, the passenger told the protagonist that he was too sleepy and wanted to rest for a while, asking if this wasn't just an online car service and why there were so many rules. The protagonist, looking at him seriously, mentioned that if he didn't put his shoes on, then he would have to get out of the car, but the passenger responded he would get bad reviews and was just a terrible human being. The boy's girlfriend ends up telling the protagonist that he was deliberately looking for a fight, if anything, saying, "So, if there's even a smell, you can put up with it," and then telling him, "So isn't it funny that he's in the service industry and still despises the neighbors with smelly feet? But people who aren't going to despise a person who gets in the car with feet like that. No, I'd kick him out of the car." The protagonist, already annoyed, told him that he was an online car driver, not a foot washing technician, and he had no obligation to put up with his smelly feet. And besides that, his posture, interested in their girls, house, or fortune, he was basically calling them easy and asking if she wasn't ashamed, considering she was barely, while sitting was very dangerous, telling him, "So, if you put your shoes back on, I'll continue to take you to your destination, otherwise, get out and call another car." However, the boy ignored the protagonist's words and continued to put his feet up on the car, so, without further ado, the protagonist ended up getting out of the car. To get the boy out once and for all, the girl, seeing this, ended up shouting for help and pointing at the protagonist, told everyone that the protagonist had thrown her shoes to her boyfriend and dragged him out, strangling him by the neck, asking how he was supposed to drive a car like that. However, the protagonist only said that he would leave, that everyone should judge as they saw fit, telling the people who were there that this man took off his shoes and stretched out his feet, and when he got into the car, he reminded him to wear shoes and pay attention to the car's safety. He didn't like it, so he helped him out of the car. The people, those who were there, whispered that all the online taxis were now so overwhelmed and that the passenger was truly disqualified. But they had a question. Why was the protagonist driving a luxury car to work as an online taxi? They wondered what kind of rich kid he was. The protagonist goes out to experience life, and as he approaches the protagonist's car, He wonders what kind of luxury car it is, since it doesn't seem ordinary. However, he's surprised to see that it's an HT. Perhaps noticing her boyfriend's reaction, she asks if that car is worth a lot of money. Over 20 years old, and messing with men in their 40 seconds and 50 seconds all day long. These words from the protagonist make the girl quite angry. But, to which he responds that the car is worth $1 million, and apparently the protagonist is rich, meaning they could be in trouble. The girl, seeing that, the protagonist, being wealthy, kindly approaches him, expressing his sincere apologies for not having stopped him sooner, and as a gesture of his remorse, he invites him to. During the meal, her boyfriend confronts her, questioning what she meant by that statement, to which she retorts that she intended to invite a handsome man to dinner, to apologize to him, calling him brother, and telling him to go home first, as she would handle the situation. He was left wondering about the brother remark, to which the girl replies that it was true, telling him that he had been annoying and disobedient since childhood, so he shouldn't make her angry. The protagonist, referring to the girl, he remarked that, since he was her brother, perhaps she could retrieve her shoes from the car, to which she ultimately agreed. She ends up throwing the shoe out of the car, but remains seated as if someone had instructed her to stay put, and from inside, the protagonist was telling her that. He invites her to come in, as he's also inviting her to dinner, something the protagonist was already aware of. The car door thanked him for his kindness, but once she was inside, he told the girl that his rear camera was a little blurry, asking her if she could get out and clean the camera for him, to which the girl replies, yes, that. Of course, he just had to wait, since she would get out to clean the camera for him. However, the instant the girl gets out of the car, the protagonist drives off. Before she could do anything, the bald man called her to ask if something was wrong, to which she responded, turning around with a friendly face to assure him that everything was fine. The girl yelled from outside that he had to wait, since she hadn't even gotten into the car yet, and her bag was still inside. However, her bag ends up being thrown by the protagonist. Her boyfriend then asked if she was ashamed, since all she wanted was to be rich. Unfortunately, or rather, he didn't like the protagonist. Upon hearing this, the girl ends up slapping him and saying that nobody understood her, and she asked him why he did that. The boy responded that he didn't know, and then asked her why she did the same. She argues that she must have offended him when she acted so arrogantly in the car, and that she must have been desperate to escape when she clung to him like that. And folks, if you didn't understand that explanation, well, I don't blame you because I didn't understand it either. As for me, when the boy heard her, the explanation ends with him apologizing to the girl, saying it was his fault for misunderstanding everything. However, the girl tells him that, if he really wants to make her feel better, he should give the protagonist a bad review and call to complain, which the boy ends up agreeing to, telling the same person that he will give a bad review right then and there, and call again to complain. Moving on to the protagonist, he ends up receiving a message from the system, informing him that he had received a bad review and a complaint from a passenger. Without further ado, the system appears, or rather, the girl from the bat. The bald man told her that everything was fine, and that she should go sit down because he would be there soon. However, the bald man noticed the situation and remarked that, apparently, system appears. She congratulates him on receiving a bad review, and tells him that the system will reward him with a 32% stake in the hotel, Bao Quen, which makes him the second largest shareholder in the company. He argued that the owner must pick up the agreement tomorrow. Transfer of shares at the Bao Quen Hotel headquarters. However, as we wrap up this video, if you enjoyed it, please like, and without further ado, bye bro. They were having an unpleasant conversation, which prompted him to ask the protagonist who he was. The protagonist responded by introducing himself as Chao's ex-boyfriend, Fei, which made him ask the girl if that was true. However, she, playing the victim, because they all play the victim, looking at his girlfriend's photo, he stands up and tells his colleagues that when his parents passed away, they left him a house and a car, and told the bald man that she had broken up with the protagonist a long time ago, but the protagonist disagreed, stating that Times was the one who broke up with Times her asterisk. Again that same day, she didn't expect him to follow her and hurt her, saying, so the protagonist really was a bully. Those were the girl's words. The bald man believed them, agreeing with her and telling her that it wasn't her fault, and she didn't need to get angry at that type of person, and that at that very moment he would help get rid of him. Standing in front of the protagonist, he told him that the way he was bothering his girlfriend was really too audacious, which leads him to call the waitress just to have her tell manager Chen to come over, as he had something to say to him. The blue-haired girl ends up approaching the protagonist to ask why he didn't just leave, or else he would suffer even more later at the hands of someone else. On the other hand, the girl the protagonist gave a ride to thought he was a weirdo, considering how the situation had escalated, and she was curious to see how it would end. However, the boy accompanying her ended up asking if she knew the man, which she denied, claiming she didn't. She didn't know him, but he had just shown up almost online, and to make matters worse, she mentioned that the protagonist not only had a bad attitude, but also used the excuse that he was in a bad mood and wanted to drive her to commit suicide, adding that she was so scared that she ended up calling him daddy before he let her go. Therefore, he would now work as an Uber driver. Meanwhile, as he was heading to pick up his car, he received a message from his girlfriend, these words enraged the boy, who told her that since the protagonist had done that, he would avenge her right then and there, which he proceeded to do. That he heads towards the protagonist and, face to face, ends up asking him if he had been intimidating someone, to Miss One when she arrived in her ride-sharing taxi. The protagonist, with a serious look, confirms that he did and asks if there's a problem with it, asking who he was. The boy introduces himself as Chan Long, Miss One's blind date. He then tells the protagonist that he needs to apologize to Miss One and call his aunt. If he does that, she'll forgive him, otherwise he'll have to leave immediately. However, the protagonist, remaining relaxed, simply asks the boy who his father is, which makes him angry. The father is the president of Creati, and will soon invest in the hotel group spanning all the islands, so if he asked for someone to be fired, they wouldn't dare refuse. However, the protagonist seemed fine with it, telling him that he and the wealthy bald man would have to prove what they were truly made of. However, the conversation is interrupted by the arrival of this redhead, who asked why he wasn't informed in advance that they would be coming to dinner. For this reason, it seemed like a grand day, since both Mr. Chang and Mr. Liz were present. A message told him that they needed to meet and end their relationship because he couldn't give her the life she wanted, and they were two people living in different worlds. Therefore, it was a great day for his hotel. The bald man ends up telling the redhead that it was his girlfriend's birthday, which is why they decided to go to dinner. There, unexpectedly, her girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, who was also our protagonist, kept bothering her, so they couldn't enjoy their meal in peace, so she hoped that Director Chen would get rid of him. Director Chen would get rid of him. He also ended up saying that he was there for a blind date, but the protagonist intimidated his date, so he was also in favor of Manager Chen getting rid of him, since he didn't want to see him again. The red-haired man, with a smile on his face, said that anyone who would be so poisonous as to offend him, he would certainly take care of them. However, nothing could be further from the truth, as the red-haired man ended up changing his mind, since he recognized the protagonist as the new shareholder that the board of directors had just announced, and that is why he ended up calling those of security quickly removed the bald man and the boy accompanying him, also telling them they were no longer welcome and wouldn't be allowed in the future. They were a little confused and complained to the blonde man, as they didn't know what was happening, but he, with a smile on his face, he ends up introducing the protagonist as Jim Poo, the second largest shareholder of his group, and that's literally his name. What kind of name is that? Okay, let's continue. These words leave everyone speechless, as they didn't expect the protagonist to be the hotel's second largest shareholder.